Um, so, what I would probably ask to begin with is, how did people in your immediate circle receive the movie?
So to
Or
be
the
honest, I
documentary,
haven't shared it
say.
so much with people in
Right.
my immediate circle.
Right.
But for those close to me, I think there was a lot of, for the few who did share it, I shared it with. I think some were really surprised in terms of, like, there were women who clearly had no reason to be undermined or to feel inferior, or to feel like an imposter. They had the credentials, and they were surprised that it was happening even at that level. I think there were some people who, there was one or two people I remember who I was working with around the time, and they were there when this was happening and were hearing the things I was saying, but they were still surprised when they saw the film. And maybe there was part of me that realized, they didn't really believe it was as bad as I was saying, and they needed it. So having the film has helped some people in my life start to believe that this happens.
That's beautiful. I mean, the whole, I would say, message that's coming through the movies that have been shown from the beginning of the festival really highlights the need for our voice in this conversation, and for us to be visible and to share our stories. And I think it's like there's something very therapeutical, as you've expressed, for us as Black women, for instance, going deep within and asking ourselves certain questions and emerging. But equally, how do you feel that, for instance, people from other ethnic backgrounds, especially the other party that is involved in you feeling a certain way, the culture, how do you feel that this movie could start a conversation with the other party?
Well, the other parties, we've shared this film with people from different ethnicities and different genders, and we get some people who identify with the story, even though they're not an Asian woman or a Black woman. They can see themselves in this because abuse is abuse and hope is hope. But what I've also found is that some of the people who maybe would consider themselves to be identified more with potential perpetrators are surprised that it's happening to this magnitude in the 2010s and 2020s. That they're like, we didn't know it was this bad. We thought you were just offended because there wasn't enough sugar in your tea, and yeah, that's a bit, of a bother, but they didn't realize that it's causing real psychological, physiological harm. So there's a lot of surprise, and that was a surprise to me, that there was this degree of surprise about what's happening, even with women who have the credentials, the experience, and the track record. I feel like, in terms of starting a conversation, my hope with the movie Arise Firebird is we can use the movie to help, especially leaders in companies, build empathy by hearing the experiences that happen to people, and without necessarily having to face their own personal accusers. They can build empathy, and that may create a safer space for leaders to even have a conversation, so to have a difficult but powerful conversation amongst themselves about what this means to them as a person, what it means to them as a member of society, and also what it means to them as a leader. And hopefully, our hope is, as they have more of these conversations with each other, they can begin to, reflect on how they can facilitate other managers, other leaders, junior leaders, to also go through a similar reflection and begin to think about, what do you really need to first feel, then think, and then do, to be able to create a better experience for everybody at work.
I think this word empathy is very, very powerful. Do you feel that, in terms of, do you think that cultural bias, could somehow be rooted in trauma for the other party as well? And by this I will explain. I just thought that very long, we have the experience and your documentary shows it, that there can be a form of dehumanization of black people and black women. And you know, when I'm looking back in history, I'm just thinking, for a group of people to have been able to look at people like furniture, or who have been conditioned over a period of time to see a baby, take it away from a mother and drown it. It takes a conditioning to look at another human being and think that they're not. And I'm just wondering if a culture over time evolved from that, which the outcome of it, to some extent, is something that needs to be addressed mentally.
Mm-hmm. So I'll interesting about cultural perspectives, and I'll give maybe two perspectives. One from being a Nigerian, in terms of, and also in terms of, I think, speaking more to what you're talking about as being people from the more European ancestry. So I'm from a culture where the expectation was I have to work 4 to 5 times, well, 4 to 5 times hard. 7, I have to work harder, be unrelenting, be untired, and also being a woman, serve the men in my family, many of them who have forgotten, no, you never made a meal for me in my entire life. I'm like, yeah, okay, because you weren't there. But, you know, so I'm coming into the workforce as a woman, as a black woman, as a woman of color, with the expectation I have to excel, both domestically and also in the workplace, whether I am 10 years old or whether I am, 50 years old or 70. And so there's no space for me to really say, I don't think I'm being treated fairly, because for many of us, there isn't I don't have the backup even, many of us may not have that domestic backup to say, yeah, that is unfair, but like, because that concept of unfair isn't part of the language. You're a woman. You're supposed to work really, 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 really hard, and if you don't like it, find someone to marry, and then you will never have to complain again, because then you can just serve him at home. So some of us, not all, have an experience to some degree of that coming in, and I think that also needs to be untaught, because none of the women in this documentary should have had to push that hard before realizing this isn't okay for me. So there's a question around, why is the threshold for torture so high? So there's that piece, and I think that has to also be unlearned as well. From those who probably have a much more privileged background, and some of their ancestors were buying and purchasing other human beings and were colonizing other people, I do think that this goes back to my concept around psychological safety. I don't think anyone wants to be considered, okay, that's not true, I can say it. I think the vast majority of people would not want to be considered racist. I think people whose families and ancestors enslaved, killed, traded, took advantage of people of color, it probably isn't something they are proud of today. And I feel like we do need to create space for them to also unpack this in a way they can work through all the emotions, because until we can do that, I don't think we can get to a point of having a real conversation about how we move forward. Because, whether we like it or not, they are human beings as well. And each of them has a human brain. And the human brain will do whatever it can do to protect itself from extreme emotional pain, because that's what the brain does. And so this goes back to that conversation of creating spaces like this, I hope can help people feel a little more comfortable engaging with those difficult but powerful conversations, because what I believe what's on the other side is better for all humanity.
100%. Thank you so much. Could we take feedback from the audience? Yes? Okay. Would you like to say something about what you have seen today? Or you might have seen it before, but freshly seen?
So
yes,
freshly
seen.
Well, sure. Okay. Where would you like me to answer? So, yeah, I mean, I think I came on board in this project very early. Jimmy was looking for someone who could help bring the narrative to life. She knew kind of what she'd been through. She understood the kind of story that I think she wanted to tell, but she didn't know how to go about it. And that's really hard when you're trying to build into a feature film and have hit all the right notes, have the right people that come across and tell the story authentically, and show the value of the story that she's trying to tell. And it was a privilege to be part of it, because obviously throughout the project, I mean, like I said, from beginning to end, I was very much involved, and I think it opened your eyes, obviously, from all perspectives. I grew up in South Africa, so I'm very aware of things that have happened in the past which were not ideal and awful, and have been through that from the other side, but kind of with one hand always trying to be connected, if that makes sense. I think it's very important. People don't quite understand to the level of disparity, just what people, I think the haves and the have-nots, it's a huge divide still. And that's, I'm just talking about in that country. And so when you're trying to tell the story here, it's trying to get that across, but without, you're not trying to alienate an audience. You're not trying to point fingers and say, you're awful people, you're to blame at anyone. You want people to come on board and understand, because that's how you get the message across. It's like you having a relationship with someone. You can't just shout and point. You have to sit down and break things down logically, and try and get them, that person on your side, so you can just see that point of view, put them in your shoes. So yeah, it was very important, and it was a lovely project to be involved in, and we travelled up and down the country, and very small crew, but very hard working, and we all chipped in and did what we could to make the project, and I think it's a huge round of applause to our director and producer, because she knew what she wanted to do, and I'm very proud of her because she saw it all the way through to the end, and hopefully now she's going to get some recognition, and the good thing is that it's only the beginning, the start of her new journey, and that's the most important thing. So wherever it goes from here, it's only positive.
Wonderful. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay. So that was Arise Firebird by Jimi Okubanjo. Thank you so much. It's very powerful, it's fantastic, and I want to take this opportunity to thank the London International Pan-African Festival for creating this platform so we can see and hear just powerful stories. And I want also to take the opportunity to thank West Norwood Picturehouse for making it happen as well and hosting it. So it's very important. Thank you so much. Let's give Jimi another round of applause.
Ibe barakela na tusukumila nganya nyuma bikono ibe barakela na tusukumila nganya nyuma bikono ayatosini kende ameto kode ayatolongere ameto kode tolo malo ugari kumakana ayato tolo malo akebali kumakana de sini kende abebe sini kende wa abebe sa